Hey everybody, welcome to day 4 of the Throne of Eldraine set review here on the Mana Leek. I'm John as always, and today we're going to be taking a look at all of the red cards in the set in a limited set review. We're not talking about constructed, standard, brawl, tiny leaders, or whatever. We're talking about limited and draft. But we're going to jump right on into the first card here with Barge In. Barge In is a single red mana for an instant at common. Target attacking creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Each attacking non-human creature gains trample until end of turn. It's a good little combat trick that could also just end the game, depending on how big those other tramplers are. It's deck dependent if it's an auto-include, or if it's more of a if you have a spot kind of combat trick. So it's like a C-, and in some decks it's like a C+, but it's a combat trick. You play it or you don't. Up next is Bloodhaze Wolverine. Bloodhaze Wolverine is 1 and a red for a creature Wolverine at common. It's a 2/1. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, Bloodhaze Wolverine gets +1/+1 and gains first strike until end of turn. Obviously, this is also very deck dependent if you are in blue-red and very much on that draw a second card plan. This card's decent. It's like a C+, a 3/2 first striker for 2 mana. That's pretty darn good. If it's just a 2/1 for 2 most of the time, well, it's a very, very cuttable C- like most pikers are. So again, a C-, C+, that is very deck dependent. You'll know if this is an auto-include or a cut as much as you can card. Red cards are being pretty easy so far. Blow Your House Down. Blow Your House Down is 2 and a red for a sorcery at common. Up to 3 target creatures can't block this turn. 3 little pigs. Destroy any of them that are walls. There are only 3 walls in the set, and only one of them is really any decent. And the falter effect here is only good if your opponent has 3 creatures or less, or if that's exactly what you need. I'd prefer just a full-on falter. This card's super not playable. It's one of those cards that like 100% of the time that it's played, it wins, but what you don't see is the times that it just sits in the hand and does nothing. This is like a D-. It's pretty darn close to an F. Don't play this card. It's really, really bad. Bonecrusher Giant is up next. Bonecrusher Giant is 2 and a red for a creature giant at rare. It's a 4/3. Whenever Bonecrusher Giant becomes the target of a spell, Bonecrusher Giant deals 2 damage to that spell's controller. It can go on an adventure. It can stomp for 1 and a red, which is an instant adventure. Damage can't be prevented this turn. Stomp deals 2 damage to any target. I love this card. It's expensive shock, sure, why not? And then a 4/3 for 3 that my opponent will at least have to take 2 from if they want to kill it outside of combat is solid. I love it. Totally solid. It's a first pick. It's not insane in any way, shape, or form. It's not really a bomb. It's just a very, very good red creature. Just note that does deal damage to the spell's controller, so be careful about casting a combat trick on this. It might be worth it to take 2 damage, but you are going to be the one who takes 2 damage on that. But I think this is just a solid B. I'd first pick this in some packs. It might even go up to a B+, just because of the versatility of 2 cards on 1. So yeah, actually, let's go B+ on Bonecrusher Giant. Up next is Brimstone Trebuchet. Brimstone Trebuchet is 2 and a red for an artifact creature wall at common. Here's one of the walls. It's a 1/3 with Defender and Reach. Tap, Brimstone Trebuchet deals 1 damage to each opponent. Whenever a knight enters the battlefield under your control, untap Brimstone Trebuchet. This is exactly my jam. It reminds me of Nettledrone from Oath of the Gatewatch. It was a 3/1. You tap it to deal damage whenever you cast a colorless spell. Untap it. Untapped pingers off of some sort of trigger are great, and I love building decks around them so much, especially because people will frequently undervalue them, especially at the start of a format. Absolutely going to be looking for the Red X Knight Trebuchet deck. I did see at the pre-release that a lot of people actually did that, so we'll see if it's a secret at all or if everybody actually knows this is good. But I think this is just a very solid card. I've got this at like a strong C+. I'm honestly trying to hold myself back from it being a B-, but I think the 3 toughness hurts it just a little bit. These are better when they're like 0/4s, like Lobber Crew or something. Strong C+ for Brimstone Trebuchet. Up next is Burning Yard Trainer. Burning Yard Trainer is 4 and a red for a creature human knight at uncommon. It's a 3/3 trample haste. When Burning Yard Trainer enters the battlefield, another target knight you control gets +2/+2 and gains trample and haste until end of turn. 5 mana is a lot. for a 3/3 trample haste. The +2/+2 trample needs to happen for this card to be worth it. If it does, it's a pretty solid card, and if it doesn't, it's really overcosted. It reminds me, honestly, a little bit of Boneclad Necromancer, where if you're paying 5 mana for it and not getting full value, it's not great at all. But if you are getting full value, it's pretty solid. So if you are red-white, if you are red-black, I think this is a relatively decent to strong C+. If you are red-green or red-blue, well, it's maybe more of like a C-. C-, C+ for Burning Yard Trainer. Claim the Firstborn is up next. Claim the Firstborn is a single red mana for a sorcery at uncommon. Gain control of target creature with converted mana cost 3 or less until end of turn. Untap that creature. It gains haste until end of turn. It's active treason, but for little things, which I never ever like. We had Wrangle, I think it was, in Kaladesh or Aether Revolt, and it's just not very good because you don't want to steal a 3 CMC or less. Those creatures aren't impactful. The only reason you would really want to steal one is if it's their only blocker, and if it's their only blocker, you can probably just attack into it anyways. Yeah, Claim the Firstborn. I never really want to play this. I have this at like a D-. It's honestly an F just because I'm never ever gonna play it. But I know people get mad at me for saying things are Fs. But if I'm never picking or playing a card, that's by definition an F. Up next is Crystal Slipper. Crystal Slipper is 1 and a red for an artifact equipment at common. Equipped creature gets +1/+0 and has haste. Equip for 1 generic mana. Way too unimpactful for me. I have become more aggro in limited these days, but this is still just too unimpactful aggro for me. I could play a creature instead of this, and it'll probably do as much or more damage than this ever will. Super disinterested in this. It's like Strider Harness, except it gives +1/+0 instead of +1/+1, and Strider Harness was not good or playable. So this is like a D-. I never, ever want to play this card. Up next is Embercleave. Embercleave is 4 red for a legendary artifact equipment at Mythic. It's got Flash. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each attacking creature you control. When Embercleave enters the battlefield, attach it to target creature you control. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 and has double strike and trample. Equip for 3. This is what good equipment looks like. This is scary. This getting played after blocks have been decided is likely just going to end the game a lot of the time. Thankfully it's Mythic, so you won't see it too much. The effect is powerful enough that it's probably just always the first pick in the pack, though I don't know if I'm going to go into the A range. This, of course, doesn't end the game by itself. You have to have attacking creatures. You have to have enough attacking creatures that some of them are preferably unblocked, although the trample means that isn't a massive requirement. But I am going to keep this just out of the A range and give it a strong B+. This is going to be one of the more groan-inducing, oops, the game's over cards that you'll see in this set. This card's great. This is what good equipment looks like. B+ for Embercleave. Embereth Paladin is up next. Embereth Paladin is 3 and a red for a creature human knight at common. It's a 4/1 with haste. It's got adamant. If at least 3 red mana was spent to cast this spell, Embereth Paladin enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it. There's a paladin in each of these colors. They all have the same adamant effect. 4/1 for 4 haste is not a card that I really want. If it's a 5/2, it's still not a card I really want. It's a cobble brute, but with haste, which is better, you might be able to get in for damage, maybe, if your opponent has no blockers, which you're probably winning anyways. So this is just a very cuttable card for me. I've got this at like a C-. I don't know that Knight synergies really help this card out. There's a lot of Knights if you're in the Knight deck. You don't have to play bad ones. C- for Embereth Paladin, just not a fan. Up next is Embereth Shieldbreaker. Embereth Shieldbreaker is 1 and a red for a creature human knight at uncommon. It's a 2/1 with flavor text. It's got an adventure, though, called Battle Display. Battle Display is a single red mana for a sorcery adventure. Destroy target artifact. This is pretty mediocre. It's a piker a lot of the time just because there's not going to be an artifact for you to kill, and you should not be holding on to this because finally killing that artifact that maybe your opponent plays and then getting a 2-1 is not impactful. I think this is a pretty hefty C- because it is just a piker a lot of the time. Remember that you do have it in your sideboard if you're up against the artifact deck, and there are artifacts that are scary. You know, if you see an Embercleave, 100% side this in, and it's going to be a good sideboard card. But yeah, this is like a D+ sideboard card. Main deck this only if you desperately need a creature. D+ for Embereth Shieldbreaker. Or C-, I guess, because it's a piker at best. Sure. C- for Embereth Shieldbreaker. Ferocity of the Wilds is up next. Ferocity of the Wilds is 2 and a red for an enchantment at uncommon. Attacking non-human creature you control gets +1/+0 and have trample. I can see potential decks where this is good. You obviously must be non-human, which is the red-green archetype. Preferably 100% non-human if you can. Unfortunately, green and red actually do have a lot of humans, though. You must be heavily aggro, and you also must have creatures that are big enough for the trample to help. Luckily, +1 helps that out a little bit. If that's the case, then this card is probably decent-ish. It kind of reminds me of Raiders Spoils from Khans of Tarkir, but that had card draw, which made it a much better card. So I have this at like a cautious C+ in that deck, but I don't feel good giving it that grade. That grade, I think, is going to convince people to play this card way more than they ever should. I think it's a very specific deck that this is good in. And honestly, a lot of the time, another creature is just going to be better than this. So I'm actually not going to be cautious with this. Let's drop this back down to like a D+ maybe build around, but you don't even build around it. You happen to be in a very heavy non-human deck. You see that this happened to fall into your pile at some point you last picked it, and you go, oh, maybe this could maybe do some work. Let's go with D+ on this. I want to caution you against playing this except in extreme situations. D+ for Ferocity of the Wilds. Up next is Fervent Champion. Fervent Champion is a single red mana for a creature human knight at rare. It's a 1/1 first strike haste. Whenever Fervent Champion attacks, another target attacking knight you control gets +1/+0 until end of turn. Equip abilities you activate that target Fervent Champion cost 3 less to activate. By itself, it's obviously very mediocre. With other knights, it's ever so slightly better, but still kind of eh. +1/+0 to 1 attacking knight isn't really that amazing, especially not for a rare. It's a 1/1 for 1. At least it has haste, so it's going to get in for 1 damage, but being first strike doesn't matter too much unless your opponent has a bunch of X1s, which is probably a pretty ideal situation and not necessarily going to happen a ton. The equip ability is kind of cute, but there's honestly not that much equipment in the set. It feels like there is because there's one in every color at common, but you're not playing a 5-color deck, you're playing a 2-color deck in this format, which means you're probably not going to have that much equipment, and if you're in red, one of them might be a Crystal Slipper, which you probably shouldn't be playing in the first place. So, I don't know. I'm actually pretty out on Fervent Champion. I don't think it's a good card. I have it as like a C-, and that's if you're in the Knight deck and getting +1/+0 reliably. I actually don't think this is a very good card at all, and I think you should probably pass it a whole heck of a lot. C- for Fervent Champion, and I think it's a pretty weak C- at that. Up next is Fires of Invention. Fires of Invention is 3 and a red for an enchantment at rare. You can cast spells only during your turn, and you can cast no more than 2 spells each turn. You may cast spells with converted mana cost less than or equal to the number of lands you control without paying their mana costs. I have zero clue about this, like absolutely zero clue. I'm going to try it because it sounds fun, especially in the draw lots of cards deck, but that 2 spells a turn clause is going to put a real hard stop on you having too much fun. So I don't know at all. I have to play with it, and I will play with it to give it a go. It really could be anywhere from an F to a B, but I'm definitely going to start it at a B because I want to see how it works. Obviously, the best thing that you can do here is be casting you know, a pair of 5-drops each turn or something because you have 5 lands out. Obviously, if you have 5 lands, it means you could cast 1, but that extra 1 might be where you get the value from. This obviously goes way down if you're primarily just double casting spells that you could have double cast anyways. So, I don't know. I have 0 clue on this. I'm going to start it at a B. I'm going to pick it like a B. I can see the power of it being a B. I can also see it just being as bad as an F. So, let's start at B on Fires of Invention, but I literally have no clue. It could be that the fact that you can only cast the spells during your turn is what really hampers this. But you obviously build your deck around it. You don't build a deck that has a whole bunch of counter spells and interaction like that. You build a deck that is a lot of sorceries and creatures and instants that you don't mind casting on your turn. Up next is old favorite Fling. Fling is 1 and a red for an instant at common. As an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice a creature. Fling deals damage equal to the sacrificed creature's power to any target. People love this card, and they shouldn't. It's not actually that good. It's one of those cards that you die to because your opponent had a 7/7 and they flung it at your face and you died. But they had a 7/7. Odds are you were dying anyways. It might just have taken 1 or 2 more turns. I'm not a big fan of Fling. I strongly prefer not to play it. Honestly, one of the better parts of Fling is that it's bone splinters sometimes, except you can't sacrifice a crappy creature to kill a creature. You have to sacrifice a good creature to kill a good creature. Fling is a card that you just generally shouldn't play. I have it at like a D. It's not good. Those times where it kills you out of nowhere, you were probably dying in a turn or 2 anyways. Fling's a D. You really shouldn't like it as much as you do. Up next is Ironcrag Feet. Ironcrag Feet is 1 red for a sorcery at rare. Add 7 red. You can only cast 1 more spell this turn. This card's awful. Like, absolutely awful. 4 mana to ramp to 7 mana, but I need to use as much of that mana as I can on a single spell that most likely needs to be red, unless I have more untapped mana left laying around. Way too draw dependent to actually be useful. This is an F. You should never, ever play this card. Ironcrag Pyromancer is not an F. 2 and a red for a creature human wizard at rare. She's an 0/4. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, Ironcrag Pyromancer deals 3 damage to any target. This card is a card that I want to have in every pack. I really want to draft the blue-red double spell deck a lot. It looks so much like it would be my favorite deck in the format. And if you have this card on the battlefield, bolting whatever you want is great. Bolting your opponent's face is a heck of a clock. Killing a bunch of the creatures in the format is great. I really like Ironcrag Pyromancer. She is a first pick build around for sure. She is definitely like a B+, maybe even an A- in that deck. If you are not blue-red, this card is not good and probably should not make your deck. 3 mana 0/4 that maybe once or twice will bolt something, maybe not playable. So this is like a D- in most decks, but in that one deck, she is fantastic. Up next is Joust. Joust is 1 and a red for a sorcery at uncommon. Choose target creature you control and target creature you don't control. The creature you control gets +2/+1 until end of turn, if it's a knight. Then those creatures fight each other. Obviously deck dependent, depends on if you are in red, white, or red, black and have a bunch of knights. If this is definitely targeting a knight, fight spells that have a power and toughness boost are pretty good. +1 is a little weak on the toughness. It doesn't mean that your creature's just definitely always going to survive, but hopefully it will. But if this is just a 2 mana Prey Upon, it's not very good. So it's very deck dependent as well. In the Knight's deck, it's going to be like a B because it's just going to be removal. And in other decks where you're not guaranteed to make this +2/+1 and it's just going to be Prey Upon but 2 mana, it's more like a B-, maybe even a C+. So C+, B-, depends on the deck that you're in. Still, always makes your red deck. Up next is Mad Ratter. Mad Ratter is 3 and a red for a creature goblin at uncommon. It's a 1/2. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, create 2 1/1 black rat creature tokens. I don't know about Mad Ratter. Obviously, this is one of the only ways that you're getting to mind control stuff with the Black Piper in any sort of, quick fashion. But drawing your second card each turn in black-red is a little trickier. It's still doable. There is still card draw in black-red, but nowhere near as much as in blue. And if you are in the blue-red draw a second card deck, I don't know if getting 2 1/1 ground creatures is really something you're super excited about. Obviously, it's not bad. But the fact that you're paying 4 mana for a 1/2 until this finally gets the 1/1s out, I don't know. I'm not really sold on this. I have it as like a D, just because it's so unimpactful until it starts making rats. And even when it starts making rats, I'm not sure if it's impactful enough. So I've got this at a D. I'm not starting out playing this even in the black-red or the blue-red decks. I'll keep an eye on it. It could be better than I think, but I just don't think getting 1/1s is that impactful, and I don't want to pay 4 mana for a 1/2. So, D for Mad Ratter. We'll see how it goes, though. Merchant of the Veil is up next. Merchant of the Veil is 2 and a red for a creature human peasant at common. It's a 2/3, pay 2 and a red, discard a card, draw a card. Haggle is its adventure. Haggle is a single red mana for an instant adventure. You may discard a card. If you do, draw a card. Seems okay. Haggle is a little bonus value, and then getting a Rummager for 3, and it doesn't tap, which is nice. I am loving how many mana sinks there are in this format that don't tap, which makes them actual mana sinks. I think this is just a totally fine card that'll start at a C+. I'm probably just playing this in every single red deck, and in the draw a second card deck, it's going to be a little bit better. C+ for Merchant of the Veil. Up next is Ogre Errant. Ogre Errant is 3 and a red for a creature Ogre Knight at common. It's a 3/4. When Ogre Errant attacks, another target attacking knight gains menace until end of turn. A 3/4 for 4 is okay, and giving another knight menace is nifty. I think it's totally fine and just a hair above filler, so we'll be generous with a C+. C+ if you are in the knight deck. If you're not in the knight deck, then you might be in the non-human deck, which means that this is still probably a C+, because it's not a human. I guess it's just the red-blue deck where this kind of becomes a C, but generally a C+ for an Ogre Errant. Up next is Opportunistic Dragon. Opportunistic Dragon is 2 red for a creature dragon at rare. It's a 4/3 flyer. When Opportunistic Dragon enters the battlefield, choose target human or artifact an opponent controls. For as long as Opportunistic Dragon remains on the battlefield, gain control of that permanent. It loses all abilities and it can't attack or block. So you get the creature or the artifact, but you can't do anything with it. This is just good. Just solid card. It's a 4 mana 4/3 flyer, which is great right there. Red loves to get that. And if you're taking control of something cool, you're basically pacifying it. Taking an artifact is a cool little upside. You can take something that they're activating over and over, or something that's giving them some sort of value. Yeah, I think this is just very good. I think it's just shy of a bomb. 4/3 flyer. Dies to a few different easy removal spells, but otherwise will take your opponent down pretty quick. I think it's just a B+. I'm first picking this in a whole heck of a lot of packs. B+ for Opportunistic Dragon. Raging Redcap is up next. Raging Redcap is 2 and a red for a creature Goblin Knight at common. It's a 1/2 with double strike. I'm not a fan. Not a fan at all. 3 mana for a 1/2? Absolutely not. But what if it attacks like a 2/2? No. I'm not paying 3 mana for a 2/2 either. You need to put more resources into this, or you need to put counters on it, or auras, or you need to have knight synergies that line up perfectly with your curve and your attacks and the situations on the board. Otherwise, this is just super unimpactful. I have this as a D. It's expensive. It requires too much setup. Not interested. D for Raging Redcap. Up next is Redcap Melee. Redcap Melee is a single red mana for an instant at uncommon. Redcap Melee deals 4 damage to target creature or planeswalker. If a non-red permanent is dealt damage this way, you sacrifice a land. This is interesting. It's against a red permanent. It's obviously amazing. It's just a fantastic, better than lightning bolt card. Except, of course, it can't hit face. But if you have to sack a land, It's a bit more costly. It means that it's not really a one-drop spell. You're not casting this until late in the game where you can safely sacrifice a land, but it's still pretty darn good there. So I think this is a very strong B-, I think, and might honestly just be a B. It's a very good bit of creature removal here. Yeah, just don't be too greedy and cast this on like turn 2 and set yourself back that much, but late game, it's great. Early game against red, it's great. B for Redcap Melee. Redcap Raiders is up next. Redcap Raiders is 2 and a red for a creature goblin warrior at common. It's a 3/2. Whenever Redcap Raider attacks, you may tap an untapped non-human creature you control. If you do, Redcap Raiders gets +1/+1 and gains trample until end of turn. I think this is just filler. A 3/2 for 3 will be a creature that does creaturey stuff and is just kind of a C. Tapping a creature to give it +1/+1 trample is cute, but I don't know how reliably useful that'd be. Obviously, it works great if that creature that you tap was being, completely unimpactful at the time, but if it's generally anything more than a 1/1 or maybe a 2/2, you'd probably just rather attack with it as well. So I think this is just a filler C. I'm not going out of my way to play this. If I need a creature, I'll play it, and I'm not going to feel bad about it, but just a C for Redcap Raiders. Up next is Rimrock Knight. Rimrock Knight is 1 and a red for a creature dwarf knight at common. It's a 3/1, and it can't block. It can go on an adventure, though, with Boulder Rush. Boulder Rush is a single red mana for an instant adventure. Target creature gets +2/+0 until end of turn. I think this is more just kind of filler. It's 3/1 for 2. That's my favorite stats, but it can't block. And part of the thing that I really like about 3/1s for 2 is that they can block after they stop attacking, and it sort of, represents a trade that's going to happen, and quite possibly a trade up. Rimrock Knight, in order to trade after it stops being able to attack unimpeded, is going to trade probably down or sideways. Your opponent can block with their 1/1, their 2/1, their 1/2, whatever. So Rimrock Knight doesn't quite pass that 3/1 for 2 test that I enjoy. The Boulder Rush is a cool little combat trick, but +2/+0 without First Strike is not a combat trick that I ever care about. My combat tricks need to be saving my creature for me to be overly happy with them. So Rimrock Knight, I think, is very replaceable. I think it's like a C-. You probably should not play it if you can, but if you desperately need a creature, you can put it in. C- for Rimrock Knight. Up next is Robber of the Rich. Robber of the Rich is 1 and a red for a creature, human archer rogue at Mythic. It's a 2/2 with reach and haste. Whenever Robber of the Rich attacks, if defending player has more cards in hand than you, exile the top card of their library. During any time you attacked with a rogue, which this one is, you may cast that card and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast that spell. It's flavorful, it's powerful, I really like it. A haste bear is already totally fine, but exiling that card on attack, as long as you have more, is great. Getting to cast that card any turn that you attack with the robber or any other rogue, and there are a number of other rogues in the set, is just great. I think it's a snap first pick. It's pretty darn near bomb level. I think A- is not crazy for this. The only reason I'd consider dropping it down to a B+ is if you end up with way less cards than your opponent, then you just have a 2/2. But I think a lot of red decks are going to be playing out their hand pretty darn fast. So A- for Robber of the Rich, with that caveat that sometimes it's unfortunately just going to be a 2/2. Scorching Dragonfire is up next. Scorching Dragonfire is 1 and a red for an instant at common. Scorching Dragonfire deals 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker. If that creature or planeswalker would die this turn, exile it instead. It's good. It's very good. This will be a first pick in a fair number of packs and a very high pick otherwise. 3 damage at instant speed for 2 mana is fantastic. Doesn't hit face. That's unfortunate. That's why we're not going too much higher. But this is just a solid B. Very good card, Scorching Dragonfire, your first pick in a number of packs. Searing Barrage is up next. Searing Barrage is 4 and a red for an instant at common. Searing Barrage deals 5 damage to target creature. Adamant, if at least 3 red mana was spent to cast this spell, Searing Barrage deals 3 damage to that creature's controller as well. This is in the usual sort of quote-unquote bad removal that's still totally fine. You just maybe don't want 3 copies of this because it's 5 mana and that costs a lot. The first copy, though, is still fantastic, and the second copy in some decks is probably still totally fine. Hitting your opponent for an extra 3 damage off of this, if you do pay 3 red into it, is also great. Strong C+, probably just a B- on this. Just don't load up on these. Up next is 7 Dwarves. 7 Dwarves is 1 and a red for a creature dwarf, just one of them. At common, it's a 2/2. 7 Dwarves gets +1/+1 for each other creature named 7 Dwarves you control. A deck can have up to 7 cards named 7 Dwarves. This does mean that you can only have 7 in your limited deck, by the way. Limited, for those who don't know, has no limit on cards. You can play more than 4 of whatever card you want, but because this one adds a permissive rule saying you can only have 7, it does apply to limited as well. You can't have 8 dwarves, unfortunately. But keep in mind that the average draft has 2.3 copies, 2.4 copies of any given common. It's very unlikely for a draft to even have 7 dwarves. So unfortunately, you're just not really going to go off with this. It's just a bear that sometimes might be a 3/3, maybe a 4/4 if you're really lucky. And the thing to remember with this is you typically only draw half of your limited deck. You may have 2 copies of 7 dwarves, but it's only like half of your games that you're going to draw both. So don't get too crazy with this. If you see a couple early, you can try to start picking them up, and it's going to be fine. But the downside here is that while a 2/2 for 2 is playable, a deck that has a bunch of 2/2s for 2 is typically not very good, and if you don't have all of these on the battlefield at the same time, they're all just 2/2s. So I'm starting this at like a C-ish, just because bears aren't that good anymore. Be careful. Don't waste real picks on this, and yes, sometimes someone is going to go off with like 5 or 6 of these. Skullknocker Ogre is up next. Skullknocker Ogre is 3 and a red for a creature ogre at uncommon. It's a 4/3. Whenever Skullknocker Ogre deals damage to an opponent, that player discards a card at random. If the player does, they draw a card. So they discard a card at random, which is good. Random discard on an opponent is great, but they draw a card, which is bad. Giving your opponent card advantage is not good. Now, if they're out of cards, they don't draw at all, thanks to the if they do requirement, but they know this is on board, and if they can take 4, then they know they get a free rummage off of this. I can't super wrap my head around exactly how good this is. My natural inclination is that the effect isn't that great, with the potential of being too helpful for your opponent, but they can also only get a hit a few times from this before they're just, dead. So it's probably fine. I'll start it at a C+, but I'll see how it goes. C+ for Skullknocker Ogre. Slaying Fire is up next. Slaying Fire is 2 and a red for an instant at uncommon. Slaying Fire deals 3 damage to any target adamant. If at least 3 red mana was spent to cast this spell, it deals 4 damage instead. This is great. Red gets a lot of very good limited burn for this. 3 damage, 3 mana, instant speed, any target. Very first pickable out of many packs. And if you can pay red for this, 4 damage, cool. This will end game. It'll kill threats. It's first pickable. Easy, strong B here for Slaying Fire. Sundering Stroke is up next. Sundering Stroke is 6 and a red for a sorcery at rare. Sundering Stroke deals 7 damage divided as you choose among 1, 2, or 3 targets. If at least 7 red mana was spent to cast the spell, instead, Sundering Stroke deals 7 damage to each of those permanents and or players. 7 mana is a lot to ask. 7 red mana is a pipe dream unless you're mono red, and even then, 7 mana! Luckily, for that mana, you will kill 1, 2, or 3 things, and one of those things might just be your opponent, but still, 7 mana. I'm going to start on this being super passable unless you absolutely know that you're going late game, and I think that's basically only the red-blue deck, and even the red-blue deck doesn't really want to go late game. It wants to still outvalue you really fast and then close the game out. So I'm going to put this at like a D+. I think there's a very specific deck that might want it, and it will be playable there. But you have to know that you can handle a 7-drop, and most of the time you can't handle a 7-drop. D+ for Sundering Stroke. Up next is Cerkera the Bold. Cerkera the Bold is 3 red for a legendary creature human knight at uncommon. She's a 3/3. Whenever Cerkera the Bold or an instant or sorcery spell you control deals damage to a player, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card this turn. Tap, Cerkera deals 1 damage to any target. Another pinger. I love Cerkera. I think she seems fantastic. A pinger that can hit creatures, which is great. That makes combat a nightmare. And if she's dealing damage to your opponent, you get the sort of red draw a card, which, like Freeze in blue, needs to get a name at some point. Awesome. I'm surprised this isn't rare, to be honest. But of course, she's part of the legendary Knight cycle at uncommon. I'll first pick this in a lot of packs. I'm very excited to play her. Solid B for Cerkera the Bold. Thrill of Possibility is up next. Thrill of Possibility is 1 and a red for an instant at common. As an additional cost to cast this spell, discard a card, draw 2 cards. It's Tormenting Voice, except it says instant. Otherwise, it is exactly the same. It is strictly better. Somebody will yell at me because some weird deck that requires specifically sorceries is better, blah, blah, blah. This is fine. Tormenting Voice is a card that I typically didn't play in a lot of decks because I didn't like the sorcery speed aspect of it. And other people played it and it was okay. It was kind of your prototypical C, maybe a C- for me, a card that I don't want to play and other people kind of do play. But this one being instant is much better. I think every red deck would be happy with one of these, and of course the red-blue deck that I desperately want to play would love this card and would love Tormenting Voice as well. So this is like a C+, I think. Just a solid bit of red card advantage, which red doesn't frequently get. C+ for Thrill of Possibility. Our second last card is Torbran, Thane of Redfell. Torbran is 1 red for a legendary creature dwarf noble at rare. He's a 2/4. If a red source you control would deal damage to an opponent or a permanent that opponent controls, it deals that much damage +2 instead. Torbran, assuming you're in red, is great. If you are red, you want this. You definitely want to be heavy red, though, not only because you want to be casting Torbran preferably on turn 4, but because you also want to be having those slaying fires and scorching dragonfires and searing barrages and etc., because you want to be doing that extra 2-bit of damage. So as long as you are heavily red, as long as you are definitely going to be dealing damage with red stuff, Torbran is fantastic. Like an A? Maybe just an A in a red deck. Now, if red is not a color of which you are predominantly that, if you don't have at least, I would say, 10 mountains in your deck, you maybe don't even play Torbran. He drops, like, to the F range, so make sure that you are in the correct deck. Make sure that you can support it, and if you are, he's going to be very, very good. A for Torbran in the right deck. Our final red card for today is Weaselback Redcap. Weaselback Redcap is a single red mana for a creature goblin knight at common. It's a 1/1. Pay 1 and a red. Weaselback Redcap gets +2/+0 until end of turn. No. 1/1 for 1 with an ability that doesn't really excite me. Paying 2 mana to give +2/+0 means that it'll trade with something, but it's only ever going to trade with it. It's not going to survive. It's a knight, so it can have some knight synergies, but there's better knights that you can draft and play. So I have this as a supremely cuttable C-. I don't want to play this in any deck if I can help it. If I have to, if I'm in the knight deck and I desperately need another creature, sure, but C- for Weaselback Redcap. So that's going to wrap it up for red. I think red looks pretty strong. There's a surprising amount of good burn in red. I think this is going to be killing a whole lot of things. And of course, I desperately want to play that blue-red deck. Let me know what you think of red, what cards you're excited by, what cards you agree with me, disagree with me in the comments down below. Talk with me, talk with each other. As always, if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, you can find me over on Twitch, Twitter, and Facebook. You can find me at patreon.com/themanaleek if you want to become a backer there and help the channel out. There's a big old group of people who are fantastic. You can also go over to inkedgaming.com and use the promo code MANALEAK10, all one word, 10, as the number to get 10% off your order of playmats, dice bags. They have board games. They've got a lot of stuff over there. Go check them out. And of course, the easiest, quickest way to help out is like, share, and subscribe. But if you do have questions, comments, or suggestions, you let me know. Otherwise, I will see you all tomorrow for the green set review.